Think about this for a second. She had no title, no training, not even an army to call her own. She was just 17 years old. And yet, she changed the course of history forever. This is the story of how she did it. Just picture it. Your country, the only home you've ever known, is on the verge of simply disappearing. Well, for the people of France back in 1429, this wasn't some nightmare scenario. It was their reality. The 100 Years' War had been dragging on for almost a century.
And Broken doesn't even begin to cover it. The French armies were shattered, their morale completely gone. The English, they controlled the entire northern half of the country, including the crown jewel, Paris. For most people, hope wasn't just lost, it felt like a fantasy.
Now, in a crisis like this, you'd expect some grizzled old general or a noble king to step up and save the day, right? Well, that is not what happened, not even close. France's last hope was someone nobody saw coming. Yup, you heard that right. The person who was about to turn the tide of a 100-year war was a teenage peasant girl who couldn't even read or write. So the real question, the one we're going to dig into, is how in the world did she pull this off? All right, so to really get the scale of her achievement, we first have to understand just how dire things were for France. We're talking rock bottom. I mean, just look at this breakdown. It's completely one-sided. England's got a seasoned army, they hold the capital. France doesn't even have a properly crowned king. And it all came down to one place, the city of Orleans. If Orleans fell, and it was about to, it was game over. France would be wiped off the map. So, while the kingdom is teetering on the edge of oblivion, our story zooms in. We leave the grand scale of armies and kings and go to a small, quiet village called Domremy and into the private world of one young girl. Now, this whole thing didn't just pop up overnight. It was more like a slow burn over 4 years. When she was 13, the voices she heard just told her to be a good girl, go to church, simple stuff. But as France's situation got worse and worse, the messages got more intense, more urgent, until they delivered this absolutely unbelievable command. And look, this right here is the key to the whole story. It really doesn't matter if you think the voices were from God or all in her head. What mattered is that for Joan, they were 100% real. That unshakable conviction, that was her superpower. That was the engine that was going to drive her to do the impossible. Okay, so she has her mission. But you know, believing it yourself is one thing. Convincing the future king of France to give you an army, that's a whole different ballgame. And this journey was going to be her first big test. I mean, right out of the gate, she hits a brick wall. The local commander literally laughs in her face and tells her to go home. But she just keeps coming back. Eventually, her sheer persistence wins him over, and then she has to travel 300 miles through enemy territory in the dead of winter. The fact that she even made it there after 11 days is a miracle in itself.
So she finally arrives, but nobody's rolling out the red carpet. The court is deeply skeptical. I mean, who is this girl? So they decide to set a little trap. They put a random courtier on the throne and have the real prince, Charles, hide in the crowd, just to see what she'll do. They figured it would expose her as a fraud immediately. And this is where things get wild. She walks into this huge hall, takes one look at the guy on the throne, and just walks right past him. She scans the crowd, finds the real Charles, and bows. You could have heard a pin drop. The entire court was just stunned. In that one moment, she passed their test. So Charles is convinced. He gives her armor, a banner, and command of a small army. And just like that, this untested 17-year-old is marching off to war, straight for the most critical battle in France. And the fighting there was just brutal. The veteran French generals were all about caution, but Joan was relentless, pushing for attack after attack. And then, in the heat of battle, bam! An arrow punches right through her armor and deep into her shoulder. Now her men see her go down and they start to panic and fall back. Usually the leader gets hit, the fight's over. But Joan, well, she wasn't your usual leader. The story goes that she just yanked the 6-inch arrow out with her own hands. Wounded, bleeding, she gets right back on her horse, grabs her banner, and rides back to the front line, shouting encouragement. Can you imagine seeing that? Her soldiers' fear just vanished. It turned into this ferocious energy. They surged forward with a power the English just couldn't handle. And the result of all this? 9 days. A city that had been under siege for 7 long months, a siege that everyone thought was hopeless, was broken in just 9 days. The news spread like wildfire. The entire war had just turned on a dime. But this is where the story takes a dark
turn. Winning on the battlefield is one thing, but navigating the corridors of power is something else entirely. After her greatest victories, Joan's luck ran out. She was captured, sold to the English, and put on trial for her life.
And let's be clear, the odds were stacked against her. This wasn't a trial, it was a setup. It was a 19-year-old girl, alone and in chains, who couldn't read or write, up against a room full of Europe's most educated men. And they weren't there to find the truth. They were there to find her guilty. But here's the amazing part. We still have the trial records, and she was brilliant. She answered their trick questions with such clarity that she left them speechless. And when they finally played their last card, threatening to burn her at the stake, this was her response. Just unshakable.
Of course, they did execute her. The verdict was never in doubt. But what her enemies completely failed to understand was that by burning the girl, they were really just forging a legend.
Because history would get the final word. Just 25 years after her death, a new trial completely cleared her name. Inspired by her memory, the French finally drove the English out for good. And then, in the ultimate twist, almost 500 years later, the very same church that condemned her declared her a saint.
Joan of Arc's story shows us that one person's unwavering belief can reignite the spirit of an entire nation. Her story doesn't just end in the 15th century. It leaves us with a question that echoes through time. We all have our own Orleans out there, that impossible challenge, that battle that needs to be fought. The only question is, when will you ride?